2 Corinthians chapter 5. Just turn there with me. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 9. Look what he says. Therefore, we also have as our ambition, whether at home or absent, to be pleasing to Him. Now think about this. You know all about ambitious men. The world today applaud ambitious men. And in itself, there's nothing wrong with being ambitious. Paul was ambitious. In a sense, Christ was ambitious. The problem is, what is the object of your ambition? Now, we could sit here all night and I could talk about greedy, ambitious men and get all sorts of amens. But that's not what I want. I'm talking to you. And we as Christians have another problem. We're so passive. We have no ambition. We're kind of like stimuli response plant that just kind of waves there at the bottom of the ocean until something touches it and then it responds. That's not the Christian life. You and I are supposed to be ambitious. All over the teachings of Christ. The pearl of great price. Seek ye first the kingdom. We're to be ambitious for what? For pleasing God. In some of the resolutions of Jonathan Edwards, there's ambition all over those resolutions. We've got this false idea that passivity is holiness. And we seem, especially as men, so weak instead of vibrant. And looking to be more than what we are. And believing that we can be. A strong faith that takes hold of the promises. Says, I'm not going to wait around. I'm ambitious. I want to be like Him. You see that? It's very important. So many people who talk about sovereignty today don't understand sovereignty. And I can give you one test to determine whether or not you understand sovereignty. If the sovereignty of God causes you to be more passive, you do not understand sovereignty. But if it gives you the greatest impetus and strength and motivation to strive, then you understand. You understand. Now, also I want you to look. He says, therefore, we also have as our ambition, whether home or absent. Now you listen to me, believer. Listen to these words. Home or absent. What's Paul saying? Paul was seeking to be just as pleasing on the earth to God as he would one day be in heaven. Is that your goal? You know, for most Christians it's not. Because they just go, well, you know, we're always going to be this. We're always going to be sinners. We're never going to be perfect until Christ comes back. And that is true theology. But you've warped it. You've let it be an excuse. You haven't tempered it with all the other passages that tell us that we can prosper in the things of God. I'm not talking about this silly idea of sinless perfection, but I am talking about growing to a maturity. We can grow to a maturity. We ought to be ambitious and we ought to have as our goal, I want to be as pleasing to you here on earth as I will be in heaven, so that on that day, when I cross over, there won't be that big of a change. Do you see that? Now, a second point that I want to make. Pleasing God is our great duty. If you will notice that Paul wrote to the church in Thessalonica, he said, you received instructions from me before. About what? About how you ought to walk and please the Lord. Ought. Little three-letter word in Greek. De. Now, it carries with it the idea of obligation and duty. And what we need to realize here is this thing of pleasing the Lord is not just being thrown out to you as an option to check off in your Christian life if you choose to do so. It's not a suggestion saying if you want your best life now, you ought to do this. None of that kind of language is in the text. What's in the text is you ought to. You ought to. It is an authoritative command. Do you see that? It's something we ought to do. We ought to please God.